All right, welcome back to Dad's Guide to Thrive. I'm Israel Smith, your host, and today I'm joined by an amazing man called Jeffrey Mort from the northeastern corner of the United States in Massachusetts. Jeffrey's a father to three, a single dad, and all of his children are now teenagers. And despite what you would imagine that being a fairly challenging period in anybody's life, having three teenage children in the house, Jeffrey decided recently to pull up stumps on his career of 30 something years in construction and is now pursuing an entirely different path. So I'm really excited to chat with Jeffrey today. Jeffrey, welcome and thanks so much for joining me.
Israel, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be on your program.
Yeah, so look, let's dig in. Tell me a bit about your kids, how old they are. You mentioned in our notes beforehand they've got some superpowers. I want to hear a little bit more about your family and get a bit of the lay of the land.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're amazing, and for three kids that are related to each other, they have totally different personalities, as most parents can say about their children. And they're all on their own path, and I can see this. Even though they're just teenagers, I can see that the path that they're on and what lights them up, and I really try to encourage that for each of them. As a parent, I try not to force any direction of life or any path on them, and I let them choose whatever makes them happy. And from year to year, sometimes that changes between the three of them. But my oldest son, Jacob, he just turned 16, so now he's got a motorcycle permit and a learner's permit for an automobile, and so that's exciting. So that's one of
Mm.
his passions is motorsports, and then his other passion is technology. And he's, like most young kids, they're much smarter than their parents when it comes to tech. But he's taken
It's
things to a
like a
much.
native language, isn't it?
It is. He's taken things to a much higher level. I think when he was maybe 3 years old, we gave him back when iPhones first came out. A family member gave us an iPhone 2 because she upgraded and said, here, maybe Jacob wants to play with this thing. And he had that thing figured out at such a young age that we were going to him for advice on, hey, how do you do this? Or I'm locked out of my own phone. Can you help me?
I love it.
Actually, fast forward to a few years ago, he was getting into these electronic devices and taking them apart to learn what made them tick. And before we knew it, he was collecting, family members' broken cell phones and computers, and he was stripping them down and rebuilding them and putting them on the internet for sale. So, at one point,
Wow.
I'd say at 13 years old, he was flipping some pretty heavy duty electronic components. And I actually had to sweet talk the bank into letting him get his own bank account because he was running thousands of dollars through my PayPal, and I was getting taxed on that at the end of the year. So I said, "This has got to stop. You got to have your own business, kid."
It's like, yeah,
Um,
it's pushing my tax bracket up, man. I'm getting penalized here because my son's an entrepreneur.
it was, and
That's
so yeah,
amazing.
that's kind of gave him that mindset of entrepreneurship at a young age. And music is his
Uh-huh.
other super talent. My oldest son, Jacob. Um, every instrument that he ever picked up, he understood how to transpose music from one instrument to the next, and basically was self-taught. He had a few lessons in music class, and then it was just a rocket ship from there as far as his journey through music. So whether it was saxophone, and anybody that's ever tried to learn the saxophone knows it's not a very easy instrument to learn. But saxophone,
I,
clarinet, flute, keyboard, piano, guitar, you name it, he can pick it up and
wow.
play it and read and write music.
All,
So
all
he's
I've
pretty
learned
pretty
about
diversified for a
sax.
16-year-old.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I learned a little bit of piano and then I was able to translate that to a bit of guitar and then I'm primarily a drummer. So, who's the
Ah,
least musical guy in the room? But
you,
the
you and I have that in common then, except for the piano part.
fantastic.
But I started off with
Guitar and
percussion and
drums.
ventured
Yeah.
into guitar.
So tell me about the rest of your family.
My middle child, Elise, my daughter, she just turned 14, and she's into sports. She's actually going into vocational school this year, and she's in an exploratory portion of that school. So she's going through some different vocational shops and sort of deciding what she wants to do for a career path. And much like myself, when I went from eighth grade to ninth grade into junior high, from junior high into high school, we were posed with a question: what do you want to do for a career for the rest of your life? When you're like
Mm,
14 years old. And back then I chose electrical. So I'm interested to see what she chooses for a career path, because she's enjoyed some of those exploratory vocational programs um, a little differently than I guessed. She wanted to go in for veterinary tech or health tech, which I thought was fantastic, but she didn't like either one of those programs. She really enjoyed cosmetology, which is perfectly fine, but she also enjoyed metal fabrication, and now she's in a carpentry class right now. So she's really enjoying the hands-on skilled trades, just like I was brought up in. And she's an amazing artist as well, although she won't admit it, and it makes her uncomfortable when I tell her she needs to put her work out there to the world,
mm.
because it's just phenomenal, the artwork that she can produce, by what's inside of her. It's amazing. And she's such a sweetheart, but she's a firecracker. And I feel bad for anybody that crosses her. So,
There's a
and
lot of
then
parallels there with my daughter who's 15. She's got a range of interests. She has an amazing voice, can sing anything and sing it beautifully. And I say to her from time to time, listen, why don't we collaborate on some stuff or release some music? She's like, oh God, no, I don't want anyone else to hear me sing. I'll just sing for you and for mum and in the house, but she's always singing, and also has that little edge to the personality that you don't want to cross.
it's funny, and that's good. That's a good life skill to have in the future time.
100%.
Yeah. So my youngest son, James, and James is not quite a teenager yet. He's 11 years old, but close enough. He is just such an empath and such a compassionate young kid that has a heart as big as gold, always thinking of other people, putting other people first. Like he's the first one to want to help and want to reach out, and comes up with the ideas for, what we can do for the family or the community or a friend or whatever the case may be. And then, other than his compassionate heart, he is a sports prodigy. And I was never into sports, so I don't know where this came from. But any sport that he tries, he just excels at, like total triathlete someday, or MVP status, whether it's basketball, football, soccer. I mean, you name it, this kid, anything that he picks up, he's just he excels at it. So wonderful, wonderful to be able to nurture those superpowers and those talents, for my own children. I can't wait to see what direction they go in life.
It's so good. That must be really, really exciting to sort of to have that bird's eye view of three incredible and very, very, like you say, unique and different children, each with so much possibility on their path ahead. So
It's wonderful, yes.
yeah. So I'm curious about a couple of things, and I do want to get back into, as you said, your son Jacob's kind of adventure through schooling and how that's different to the typical, and also how that's impacted you as a father and in the family unit. But I'm interested too in a bit about what was sort of the genesis of you choosing to separate from your partner. What were some of the sort of signs that were showing up, and how did that kind of unfold? And as much or as little detail as you're willing to go into there. But I think that for the benefit of our listeners and the audience with this, I feel like understanding what are some of the warning signs for dads in the audience who may be struggling a little bit with their partner. What are some things that they can keep an eye out for that perhaps you've been through and lived through that might help them, I don't know, correct course or identify more clearly what's going on or what have you? Would you be willing to share?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So we were actually married for 17 years, which was, during that time it was wonderful. It was great. Having three children definitely takes its toll on a marriage and the communication. We we always communicated very, very well, and we still do to this day, I have to say.
Mm.
We probably make better co-parents than we did partners in the last couple of years of our relationship. But I would say that the stress put on a household for a stay-at-home mom with three kids, and then the dad that is constantly working to make ends meet, whether that's 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. especially through, we're going back to like 2008. We had two children then, and that's when, the savings and loan industry crashed. I closed down
Right.
my electrical contracting business. I went to work for another company. I was always at work so that I could try to pay for, the position that we were in life. And it was difficult, and
Mm.
it took its toll on our marriage, so to speak. And that was going back quite a ways. We recovered from that, and then had our youngest son James in 2010. um, the communication was always there, so that is key. I mean, you know that for any relationship, whether it's a partnership with a spouse, or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the case may be, or whether
Yeah.
it's with your children, or whether it's with a business partner or a client. Communication is definitely key, and that was always there at the forefront. So we would, in most typical relationships that are going south, or taking a negative tone, the communication usually lacks, where the partners communicate less and less. There's more and more tension, and then they just throw their hands up and say, "That's it, we're done." It
Right.
wasn't like that. We had, hundreds of hours of sit down conversations, and about, where we were, and where we were going, what we wanted and what we weren't comfortable with. And we
Mm.
really talked it through, right up until we decided that, maybe we would just make better co-parents than we would partners. And it wasn't easy, but it's not the typical situation that, usually dissolves a 17-year marriage. And, even today, after we've been separated, legally divorced for 4 years now, we still have that level of communication. We talk every day. We co-parent. We share responsibilities. We share finances, as far as financial responsibilities with the kids. We
Hmm.
participate in all those things, and it's a situation where, most divorced couples don't communicate. Most divorced couples don't collaborate as far as, spending time together. We spend time together. I go over there for, Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner with the kids. Like, we're always talking, we're always communicating back and forth. As far as the separation, during that process, we decided to go a different route, and make this all about, the experience that the kids would have during that typical situation, getting separated. So we decided, mutually. It took a little bit of convincing on my part to get her to buy into it, but to get to family counseling, so that we could work through that with a professional, and go through that, and developed a great relationship with a wonderful counselor, who we still see to this very day. Whenever we have an issue we need to work through as, extended family, and as co-parents, or as individuals, or with one of the kids specifically. So that was a huge plus, as far as the experience for the kids working with a professional. And when we were going through our separation, we decided again to not go the typical route of using attorneys. As anybody that's ever done that would know, that that gets very expensive, and usually end up in a battle at some point. And that didn't happen. We used a mediator, and even the mediator was blown away by how amicable our separation was. And even the judge that actually did the actual divorce in the courtroom was, she actually stopped and took her glasses off and said, I got to hand it to you guys. I've never seen any couple go through a divorce agreement like you guys did. Everything was, well thought out and planned, and it was never about the money. It was always about, the well-being of everybody involved. So that was, if anybody could ever, I always try to lead by example. I always try to model, after the best situation. What imprint can I leave in the world that other people can model after? That would definitely be one of them for anybody that's ever going through a separation, whether it's just a partnership or a marital separation. Is, set your ego aside, and make it all about the well-being of the kids, and not a typical separation. And I even found, I said my youngest son James is an empath, and one of his friends at school was going through his parents were getting divorced, and my son actually played the role of the counselor to talk his friend through this, this horrible experience that he thought it was going after. And my son James says, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be a horrible experience. Let me share my experience with you. And this was, back when he was 8, 9 years old. He shared that with me, and I was, again, blown away by his compassion and his heart that he was modeling what he saw his mom and I do, and modeling what the counselor walked us through in that separation, and using that to, one of his schoolmates, one of his classmates at, the mere age of 8 years old. So
One of the amazing things about what you've just explained, Jeffrey, is that you were able to maintain such a beautiful, amicable, peaceful relationship with your partner, despite the reasons that you chose to separate and change paths. And I really feel like there's a lot of, I guess, self-awareness and emotional maturity that plays into something like that. Like it's obviously when we're emotionally really invested in something like a relationship, like a marriage, and being a parent and all of that, I'm really curious whether there's anything you can pinpoint in your own past or your own learning up until that point that maybe helped you, I guess, put the ego aside and just be able to kind of handle that peacefully and just be able to kind of, keep yourself pretty regulated through what would have been very difficult circumstances.
that's a very good question. And if I can get a little deeper and esoteric here, that I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason.
Mm.
And I always had this comforting feeling that there was a reason behind this. And coming out of it on the other side, I want to say that this path that I'm on now, I probably wouldn't be able to be on that. And we can talk about that in a few minutes. I probably wouldn't have been able to fully step onto this journey that I am on now had we stayed together. And I want to say it was divine intervention coming into play and letting us both know that this was the right thing to do,
Mm.
so that we could grow and expand in the ways that we both needed to do. And we weren't able to do that when we were together.
Right. So, I'm thinking back to, say, 4.5 years ago, maybe longer, the writing's on the wall. You clear that for whatever variety of reasons. And I know it's never normally just one thing. It's usually a whole suite, a bit of a grab bag of different kind of factors. It was no longer viable for you and your ex to continue married. You wanted to still be good parents. That was a very clear value that you held. Did you, I don't know, did you have like a past life as a Zen monk or something? Like how did you stay in some sense of peacefulness and have that, because it would have been really difficult. There would have been some very uncomfortable conversations and circumstances. What do you think, apart from that belief that everything happens for a reason, like, is there any other practices that you have in your life or have had in your life through that period that maybe helped you stay calm and stay level headed through all of that?
There was definitely. It's an excellent question. And so in about 2000, I would say 14 or 2015, working construction for so many years, I was, my body was all beat up and bent and twisted, and I was just sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, waking up sore every day. And at the
Mm.
time, going back a little bit, with the kid's mom being a stay-at-home mom, she wanted some activities for the kids, and one of those things was something to teach them discipline. So she signed them up for a local karate course, and the during the course of that, they had a bring your parent to class night, and so their mom went and joined one of the classes, and she was hooked. So she started participating in karate and went up through the ranks so fast that they said, "We want you to come in and teach, and we want you to teach the
Oh,
kids."
wow.
So once she advanced far enough where she could start teaching, she started teaching the kids. And her karate instructor teamed up with a Tai Chi instructor that wanted to use the same space. And that Tai Chi instructor came from an athletic background in track and field. So his name is Karim. And she she said, well, why don't you go to one of Karim's classes and have him teach you how to stretch so you're not sore all the time? So
Oh, wow.
I went to one of the Tai Chi classes to learn how to stretch. And lo and behold, of course, he started teaching me Tai Chi. And
Mm,
that was probably my lead domino into the health space and the wellness space. Not only Tai Chi, but Qigong as well, which Qigong is, if Tai Chi were a young woman, Qigong would be the great great grandmother to that young woman.
right. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so Qigong is more of a moving meditation. So that really helped me stay grounded. And I would say
Mm,
through that turmoil, that practice and that was my anchor for sure.
right.
Being able to do that, and I'm still an avid practitioner of Tai Chi and Qigong on a daily basis, and I still participate in that group 3 times a week as well. So that, and again,
Ok-
everything happens for a reason. So that being my anchor was probably the way that I kept my shit together, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that all makes perfect
and
sense now. I was thinking, what was the special sauce? What was that magic thing that let you just stay so at peace? But
And don't get me wrong, Israel. It wasn't always easy. There were a lot of tense moments. There were a lot of tears throughout the whole process, and it wasn't all bubblegum and rainbows for sure.
right.
It was
Yeah.
it was a difficult, and like I said, hundreds and hundreds of hours of one to one, like deep soul searching conversations with each other, and
Mm,
and counselors as well, and
yeah.
even the counselor gave us admiration and told me that with your trust in the outcome, if you could bottle that up and sell it, you'd be set for life for
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I certainly didn't mean to diminish or downplay the fact that I'm certain there are challenges that came up through that, because I think it's too much of a, in a way, like a personal cataclysm to go through a relationship breakup of that nature without something challenging. But I can see where, like you say, the Tai Chi and Qigong practices became an anchor. That's what helped ground you. That's what helped. And I'm sure on the days that you were feeling particularly shit, that would have been like, okay, I need to just go do some Tai Chi for half an hour or an hour and just, recenter and reconnect to me. Right. It's one of those things the more wobbly things get, the more you lean into those sorts of practices to kind of to bring you back to square.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the breathing techniques in that is what really helped me to be able to instantly to learn how to instantly calm my sympathetic nervous system. So when I was feeling anxious or overwhelmed
Mm,
or having anxiety, I would go right into those breathing exercises, and it's like the instant reset button for
yeah.
the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system
Mm,
overwhelm. It's amazing what breathing can actually do. And for most people to, they might hear that and they might understand that, but unless you're disciplined enough with yourself to actually stop and implement that exercise and that practice to do it. It's kind of like going to the gym. Everybody knows it's good for you, but to set up a routine and be disciplined and go as often as you should, it's a different
mm.
story.
I also think, even on that point too, there's a subtle difference with having a breathing practice or a yoga or a Tai Chi or some sort of, moving meditation, some kind of practice like that. Um, the real muscle strength, for want of a better analogy, is actually not just scheduling it in your calendar, but it's being able to acknowledge and recognize when things are going a bit sideways, when you need to almost stage an internal intervention with yourself and go, hang on a minute, hang on, this is not me, this is not where I want to be. Okay, I'm going to wrestle myself into this practice that I know is like broccoli. It's really good for me. It might be a bit annoying to get started and take the first few bites. Now, I agree with you wholeheartedly that everything happens for a reason, and I'm starting to see the dominoes line up. Your former wife starting karate, that introduces you to Tai Chi, Qigong, that gives you this amazing grounded, centered kind of presence and ability to deal with whatever curveballs life presents to you. And then you realize, okay, the marriage is no longer a future proposition. We need to come to a peaceful, or as peaceful as possible, resolution. All the way through this, you're obviously holding as a really high value your love and care and role modeling for your children, that you want them to see what it looks like to be I guess, a more conscious person, someone who's very present, very self aware, moving through difficult stuff without throwing adult tantrums every half an hour. And then you make your way through that and you reach this point where you're like, I think I think my life working as an electrician is no longer what's doing it for me. You know, obviously you said you'd found some physical challenges that you were able to overcome through the practices of Tai Chi Qigong. But what happened next? What was the kind of the next domino that went, oh, maybe this career is really not right after all?
Well, I would say that, between the two paths coming together, there was a stitch in between where, I wasn't feeling my best self. I struggled with depression for many, many years. Looking back, I would say probably from a teenager, um,
Mm,
back back then, and that always, once in a while would rear its ugly head, and I'd get in a funk, and sometimes that would last a day or an hour, and sometimes it would last weeks or a month.
mm,
And I think that probably took its toll on our relationship as well. Especially if I want to say to anybody listening, especially the dads out there that have a stay-at-home mom, like mommy burnout is real. That is a real epidemic in this world, and overwhelm for the moms, whether it's emotional balance or just overwhelm on all the things it takes to raise a family nowadays.
mm.
And because I was always gone at work, that it probably built up, and then overflowed that rain barrel, on our relationship, on her overload. There was a point where she was on medication um, for her anxiety and whatnot. And now learning natural health, I can see what led up to that, and that was not the answer, back then. But you know, my bout of depression at its worst was probably when the marriage started, um, you know, having those elements that led up to its final demise.
Right.
And I I can see now that it was a sense of lack of purpose. I think. Well, I don't
Mm,
think I know that. Like I was always trying to find the root cause of my depression. I never wanted to participate in taking antidepressants. Although I struggled with alcohol for many, many years. I would say from my teenage years up until probably, when I started taking Tai Chi and Qigong. And I would try to dilute my worries and dilute my depression with alcohol. And that wasn't, obviously that wasn't the answer. But once I started doing good things for my body, whether it was Tai Chi or nutrition, but then I would go back to having some cocktails at night, that, I would say, I'm caught on this friction plate where I'm doing something good for myself and for my body, but I'm going back to my old habits and my old ways, and I don't like that direction. Like here I am
mm.
doing something good and I'm heading in a good direction, and then I'd come home from class and mix up a cocktail or two before bed, and it'd be like, what am I doing? Like I felt wonderful 10 minutes ago, and now I feel like I'm junk.
Right. I can
So
relate to that. Like, I know from my own experience, doing a lot of good things for your body and then noticing the kind of the discord or the clang of something that's out of alignment with that, where you're like, oh, I'm doing Tai Chi and Qigong and I'm feeling great, I'm eating well. And then I'm going to throw down some alcohol. And then your body goes, ah, that's not right. It's almost visceral, right? Like it's almost an immediate, oh, that feels terrible. Why would you do that to me? And I can relate to that as well. It's so interesting because I think part of those practices of elevating how we feel physically and our health, it actually like it almost like sort of turns up the gain or the amplification on our sensitivities and our awareness of when things aren't in line with that. I don't know. Have you had a similar experience that the more of that rabbit hole you go down, the more you notice things about your body, you have like an enhanced literacy of it, and you notice real subtleties that maybe before you would have just steamrolled over and not even paid attention to?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I feel as though our emotions are our barometer. Our emotions
Mm,
are letting us know. what contrast we have in our life, and what, anytime somebody gets into anger or rage or depression or whatever the negative emotion might be on that scale is is like a dashboard light coming on, or a warning, light or gauge going up into a red line that's letting you know that, this is not something, a direction that you should be going into,
Mm.
and that something's not right. So, you know, a lot of, especially guys, they don't like to talk about their emotions. They don't like to deal with their emotions. They do things to suppress them. And they even hand that philosophy down to their children. And we don't talk about our
Right.
feelings in this household or whatever. And that's to such a detriment of the next generation. It's doing them a disservice for sure. So, I make sure that I let my children know that it's okay to feel upset or angry or hatred towards somebody, but you need to work through that, and you need to, deal with that and turn that back into, let's observe ourselves, let's observe our emotions, and let's step back and take a bird's eye view of where we're at, and what has us feeling the way we feel, so that we can navigate into a better direction.
So good. Brene Brown talks about it beautifully when she references shame. She said, shame can't survive daylight. When we bring shame out of the dark corners, when we expose it to light by talking about it, by expressing it, by really getting curious about it and sharing it with other people, it loses all of its potency. It loses all of its power over us. And we can then look at it for what it is, which is just another emotion that often comes from a faulty story or a bad interpretation, and or perhaps I don't know, an interpretation that doesn't help us or serve us. But then having that courage and also the freedom, particularly for our kids, to say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit ashamed of this, this, and this," and as I talk about it, I can recognize that there's no need for me to feel that shame. It's actually just a bunch of stuff that happened. And I can now tell myself a different story about what went on, and I can feel what I need to feel and process it and then move on.
That's wonderful, and it's a very good point. And as far as shame, what a lot of people do with that is an either even unhealthier version of expression than, throwing a fit of rage or yelling or screaming or taking it out on somebody else. As they internalize their negative feelings, their shame, their guilt, their anger, their rage. And I was one of those people. I was somebody that,
Mm.
I didn't want to hurt anybody else. I didn't want to fly off the handle in a fit of rage, although sometimes it was hard not to, snap at the children or whatever the case was. I would internalize this, these emotions, especially going through the divorce, where I was just trying to grasp an understanding of, like, where did we go wrong, what happened, and self blame and shame and all those emotions. I was internalizing those sometimes for weeks at a time. So to say that it was, even though it was an amicable separation, uh, it was not easy, and it was a learning experience for me, and a learning experience where internalizing those feelings actually landed me in the emergency room a couple of times, where I was having internal pains that just they wouldn't go away. So I was concerned enough, and ended up going to the hospital, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They, were
Oh,
doing
wow.
CT scans and blood work and ultrasounds and all kinds of things where the pain was, and they just could not pinpoint what the problem was. Now, hindsight, knowing a lot more about internal energy, from my martial arts practice and from my natural health practice, I now know that I was bringing that onto myself, and those
Mm.
problems were manifesting into my body reacting to those negative emotions. And there's, I don't want to say there's no medication that would have taken care of that, but the quickest medication is to, get those feelings out and talk about those things. And that's where some of those counseling appointments and conversations, deep level conversations with my kid's mom at the time were therapeutic, to just get those things off my chest and talk those things out. So as hard as some of those conversations might be with somebody, whether it's a partner or a child, or a parent, or a sibling, or whatever the case may be, get those things out in the open and talk them out, and don't internalize them.
So good. I have like something I teach my clients and that I kind of have developed is this thing called a thrive list. And there's 7 items on it. And number 7, the last one, the kind of the capstone to, to kind of round it all out nicely is brave conversations. And often the brave conversations start with ourselves. We need to be brave from the perspective of being radically honest with ourselves about, what is it that I'm really feeling right now? Am I willing to admit to myself that things are not quite right? And then once we get the courage to face internally what's going on, like for example, you said, internalizing all those emotions and then coming to the realization that, wow, all these physical manifestations might be just because I haven't actually let myself feel anything for the last 6 months or 12 months. And I just need to feel it and I need to talk about it and I need to, again, it's another layer of brave conversations. And in doing so, it's always scarier before you start than it is once you're in the moment. Don't you agree? Like it's we build it up in our
100%.
head. Right. We build it up in our head to be this horrifying ordeal. The hardest part is just saying, hey, can we just have a chat and then just start? And then once you start, it's almost like the floodgates open and everything you need to say just starts pouring out. And then tears flow or emotions start to show up and pass or whatever it is. But it's never as bad when we're in the middle of it as we think when we're leading up to it.
Absolutely. If you hesitate and you think about it too long and you get up in your head and what if this, what if that, and then you end up in the worst case scenario like the brain does because it doesn't want to be in that uncomfortable situation. It's trying to keep you out of that discomfort and in your comfort zone. And sometimes you might go days or weeks without having that conversation, and then it builds up and builds up inside of you, and then you have the conversation, and like you say, it wasn't that bad, or that was
Right.
productive, or why didn't we do that 2 weeks ago?
Or I feel like, 100 pounds lighter because I've gotten this off my back and off my chest, and we can start to think clearly and feel a bit more relaxed and all of the stuff. Yeah. We're preaching to the choir here, mate. I completely get
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And on that token, I want to talk about one of the other modalities that I explored. Tai Chi led me into, if I could feel this good, then what else is possible? That led me into things like massage therapy and chiropractic work, and then energy work like Reiki. But there's a wonderful modality out there, and it's called craniosacral therapy. And deeper in that training is something called somato emotional release, and that's where the body holds on to emotions or tension or it could be something like a surgery that somebody had, or it could be a car accident where that sudden impact of a head-on collision in a car, like that energy is absorbed into the muscle, the tissue, the fascia, the bones of the body, and it needs to actually be released. And there is a practice that is accepted by many insurance companies now, that craniosacral therapy somato emotional release method, that the practitioner, similar to Reiki work, kind of, it's an energy modality.
Mm.
The practitioner puts the body in a position to allow that energy to dissipate, and that was a game changer for me, for sure.
Wow. I've not heard of that. I've heard of Reiki and I've heard of a lot of the other things you spoke of, but that one's a new one for me. That's really interesting. But it makes sense when we consider that like our body is almost like the walking roadmap of everything we've physically and emotionally and mentally experienced. It's kind of manifesting in how we show up in our physical body. And wow, it makes so much sense. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit and learn more about it. I'm fascinated by that.
It was created by John Upledger in the 1970s, I believe, and he
Mm.
founded the Upledger Institute that still to this day teaches that practice. Although John's since left this planet, he left behind a wonderful place that still teaches his methods of that type of therapy, that energy work, and it's amazing. He's got a book that's out. It's called Your Inner Physician and You, and it really gives um, a layman's entry level explanation to how craniosacral therapy works. But the
Mm.
gist of it is that there's a membrane that runs. If you could picture what a tadpole looks like, a embryo of a frog, right?
Yeah.
It's big and round at the beginning, and then it's got the tail that eventually forms the back end of the frog. It's a similar shape of a membrane around your brain and around your spinal cord that has a fluid in it that actually has its own pulse, so to say, and that pulse contains that energy. So working with that membrane to work with the central nervous system, and then that extends out into all the muscle tissue and fascia that actually holds that tension. It's an amazing modality, and the results that I've gotten from it over the years is just profound.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So let's bring it forward now. You are in the process of transitioning to a new career path, and listeners will be completely not shocked to hear that the path is in the health and wellness space based on the passion and the diversity of experiences you've had. Um, Tell us about how you got to that kind of discovery within yourself, because I'm certain that there are other people listening who are going, I just don't think that what I'm doing right now is what I'm meant to be doing for the rest of my life. Talk us through, how did you get to that kind of realization? And then, the from where did the courage come from to make the first leap in that direction?
Great question. I spent 33 years in the construction industry, like we spoke about, and some of that was as an employee, some of that was as an employer. I had my own electrical contracting business for about 13 years, and then in 2008, I I went to work for somebody else when the savings and loan industry crashed, and I had most of my eggs in the residential basket in here in the area that I live in, and I had two young children, another one on the way, and I needed to do something. So I went
Mm,
to work for one of the largest electrical contractors in the area here, and I worked for them for a while, but it just never felt right. I actually, as of this time, I'm still employed by them. So I sort of have one foot in the construction industry and one foot in the wellness space. So that's, you're catching me at a very pivotal moment of my life.
right.
And I decided that I want to explore entrepreneurship, and I reached out to a friend of mine, Danielle, who at 35 years old was a self-made millionaire who created a software business that actually started in well, it didn't start in Australia, but I'll get to that in a minute. But she started a software business that actually they took uh, court legal documents that were PDFs and converted them into digital software for attorneys. And she created this software company that absolutely took off, and it was her brainchild. So I asked Danielle. I said, "Will you teach me entrepreneurship? Will you get me into that and
Mm,
explain?" And she asked me. She's like, "I got to ask you one question." And I said, "Well, what is it?" She says, "Are you ready?" Am I ready for what? She's like, "This is going to be a ride, so you better sit down and buckle up." Because it's not easy. It's not always fun. It's not what everybody makes it out to be. So if you're ready, I'll show you where to start and how to get going. And that's what really dove me into entrepreneurship, service first. Back, I would say back in before I asked that question, I didn't even know what passive income was.
mm,
So it was an amazing journey that she walked me through, and it really started with mindset and the mental game on that. I think the first book that she recommended for me was As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, which was written back in the 20s or something, which really
right.
just totally reset my mind. That was my first mind reset.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that sort of led me down the path that what I was currently doing, working for somebody else, was not what I wanted to do. So I decided that I was going to take my experience and my knowledge, and I was going to package that up and create an educational platform for electricians in my industry, so that I could teach them leadership and skills, and teach them what I knew from 33 years, basically fast track them from going through decades of their own experience, where they could take an online course or do one-to-one coaching with me. And knowing that the construction industry is absolutely toxic. It can be mentally, physically, can be toxic. It's in heavy commercial construction, it's a numbers game. It's a lot to do with the blame game because you're usually dealing with the lowest bidder on a project and trying to make up that delta between what you should have bid it at and what you actually get the job at. And being a toxic industry and getting my feet wet in health and wellness, the conversation always ended up over in the health and wellness space. And I asked myself one day, after enrolling in a little program that you and I know very, very well, the TCP program, Clarity and Vision Week, made me really stop and think deeply into like, where do I want to be and what direction do I want to go?
Mm.
What do I want my life to look like in 3 years, 5 years? What's my plan? And it was clear to me that it wasn't in construction any longer, because
Right.
my conversation, I had a podcast for 2 years. It's actually still up and live, in the construction space, only because I had beneficial content there for people that I wanted to keep that up and running for them. But I actually, during that Clarity and Vision Week, I closed down that entire program that I had worked about 2 years on building up with the courses and the podcast and everything else, and made an
Wow.
announcement and said, I'm taking a break. I'm going to do a little soul searching and let you know where I'm coming back and what direction I'm going to go in. And that's when I decided that I didn't just want to kick my feet in the water a little bit in health and wellness. I wanted to go all in. So once I was done with that first round of that coaching program, I decided to enroll in a certification program to get some health coaching certifications. Although I felt I was qualified to be able to teach people, I would feel horrible if I misguided somebody. So I wanted a mentor that I could model after, where I knew that I was giving people recommendations that were clinically proven, and that I was confident in being able to, coach somebody to better health. So I enrolled in Integrative Health Practitioner Institute and got two health coaching certifications, level 1 and level 2. And now I am officially a certified integrative health practitioner that can help people to overcome their underlying, like you said, root causes of their
Hmm.
imbalances and get them to, to feel alive again and actually, lose weight. Anti-aging is one of the processes that we have as well. Although most people think of aging as chronological, there's also a biological element to aging where it's measured by your biology, and that process can actually be slowed down, stopped, or even reversed so that people look and feel younger and live a longer life. So, really, what I do as a integrative health practitioner is give people an extension on their life. It's all too often we hear that it sucks getting old. That doesn't have to be the case. I look, feel, and function better at 48 years old than I did at 28 years old or even 38 years old.
Hmm.
And it's amazing that the energy, the stamina that I have today is I owe that all to my education and health, and I want to help other people feel the same way that I do, and walk them down that same path. Basically, meet them where they are, and help them overcome whatever health issues that they have. And my target, so that I can have a bigger impact on the world, rather than just working with anybody. Although my mantra is that I truly believe that I now have the skills that I can help anyone with anything at any time, and I feel as though that my intuition is guided by source energy. I want to focus on where I can have the biggest impact. So the people that I enjoy working with most are entrepreneurs that have an audience of their own, but those entrepreneurs have health issues or want to up level their performance, whether they, are into health and wellness, but they have plateaued. I now have the
Right.
skills to take them to the next level.
Sensational. Wow, that's really awesome. So it's clear to me, in the same way that you and I were speaking about how much the work I've started doing now as a coach and running these interview chats, it just feels like I'm floating. It feels like it's the easiest thing in the world. It's so inspiring. It's so uplifting to me as the person, leading and delivering these. I get that same impression from you that this work, the work that you've done to date, just sort of lights you up in a way that electrical contracting hasn't done for some time, and maybe never did. I don't know, but often we start a new career with a lot of enthusiasm and passion, and it starts to sort of taper off over time. But this is the sort of thing I'm imagining for you that really is like this is a life's work. This is something you could gladly dig your teeth into for a very long time to come, and really spend yourself in the pursuit of that mission of helping people feel aged, feel better at their older age than they were at the younger age, and just overcome any plateaus and things. I think it's amazing. So
Absolutely. And I'm grateful for my experience that I had in the construction industry because that's what got me to where I am today. I feel like I've gone through everything in my life to get to this point, so I have zero regrets in life. Whether whether it was my struggles with drugs and alcohol in my younger days, whether it was my divorce. People think look at divorce as a regretful element in their life, and I have zero regrets in my life whatsoever.
fantastic. So what would you say is, and sadly, I don't know whether we're going to have time to cover Jacob's sort of current learning practices, but if you were to try and sum up what it is that you think has made the biggest difference in you overcoming all of the various challenges and curveballs that you've had to face, from mental illness, physical manifestations of, poor ill health, the breakdown of the marriage, and then, managing what you need for your own career, as well as trying to be the best dad that you can be and look after your own well-being in the midst of all of that. Like, is there a single, I'm sure there's many things that have contributed, but is there a single thing that you could say is like top of the list, or the one that you always default to, that helps you thrive, that helps you operate the best you can in your day-to-day life?
Well, you're right. There are many things that come to mind. To narrow them all down, well, there's one thing that I want to mention, and it was great advice that my dad gave to me years back when I first started having children. Is he gave me the advice that never to be too busy, being too busy, and what that meant to me at the time, I had no idea what he was talking about. But now, now that I have three children of my own, I understand that that I was that person being too busy, being just being busy, just doing all the time and never being present
Right.
for my family and my children. So I would boil it down to being a conscious parent, and that goes for even preconceived parenthood, even before the child is conceived, that there's an element of energy um, in the couple's relationship. And if that child is conceived with a low vibration of energy around it, even when it's in the womb, it's picking up on that. So if it's a stressful relationship and the mom is pregnant with the child in the womb, it's picking up on that. The child is picking up on that energy. The stress hormones that the mom might be feeling, the child's also getting those stress hormones. So if it's a tumultuous relationship, or if it's struggles in lifestyle, whether it's career or financial issues, those emotions, those feelings, whether it's the stress from the mom and the hormones going through the embryo and the fetus and the child, or the dad coming home from work and being stressed out and lashing out at the wife, like that lash out has energy. So being a conscious parent with your energy, I would say that find your anchor and learn where you can leave that stuff at the door and leave it behind you. Let that stuff go. What that really boils down to is one of the universal laws, the law of detachment. To be able to detach from the outcome, whether that's a good outcome of something that you want, or a bad outcome. To detach from a bad day at work, or detach from negative emotions, and just try to present yourself, be in the present moment with a higher vibration, a higher frequency with your energy. So my talking about coming from the electrical industry into the health and wellness industry, I really tell people that I went from one type of energy work to a different type of energy work. And And here we are, right? We're talking about our, like, we are energy. There's nothing else in
Mm,
the world except for energy. If you boil anything, break anything down to a, a basic foundational point, it's
mm,
broken down into energy. You have your body, which is made up of cells, and those cells are made up of tissue. The tissues are made up of atoms, and the atoms are made up of protons, electrons, and neutrons circling around each other. And what's there? There's just space, right? You get
mm.
the nucleus in the center, and you get some stuff, a cloud revolving around it. Like, that's energy, and
Yeah,
anything can be broken down into that. So be conscious, be a conscious parent, and be conscious of your energy at all times, because that's all you have is right now. What's in the past is gone, so there's no point in hanging on to it. So back to the detachment. And what's in the future is what you think and speak and create for yourself. So be conscious of that too. So conscious parenting would be the biggest takeaway that I could give anybody.
I love that so much. And I don't want to
Thank you.
try adding anything to that. I think that's just a beautiful summation. So, with that, I'm going to draw this to a very grateful, very, very, very grateful close. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights and your story with us, Jeffrey. I'll put details in the show notes of where people can learn more about the work you're doing now as an integrative health practitioner, if they want to sort of dig in a little deeper and perhaps reach out and contact you about getting some support with what they're having troubles with. And I'm just thrilled that we had the chance to sit down and have a chat. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, and I'd be happy to come back on if you're looking to have some future conversations. It was my pleasure being here on your program, and I love what you're doing and your mission to help dads and parents and moms and coaching the way you do. It's a wonderful thing, and I can tell that that is what lights you up as well.
100%. All right. Absolutely. Thank you again. And to everyone listening and watching, thank you for being here for this chat. And we will see you on the next episode of Dad's Guide to Thrive. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Jeffrey. And we will see you again soon.